Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
I feel like saying it's a brand new year here on the Lead Every Day show, Mark. Glad to be with you today. Fired up for this new format. We got new music. We got all kind of new stuff going on. I'm Randy Gravitt. For those listening out there, and I got my buddy Mark Miller here with me, and we're going to try to give you something new. Mark, based on some of the feedback we got, people said we want some longer stuff, and so we're gonna give it a little shot here and see what happens.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I do too. And for those of you who are interested, we're actually also going back to a YouTube format. So we'd love for you to subscribe to the YouTube channel there. Check this out. But Mark, I want to start with something I read last week. It was pretty interesting. I saw that last Friday was labeled officially Quitter's Day, and we got a brand new year going on, and everybody's had these resolutions going the last few weeks. I guess only a couple of weeks, it sounds like, because Friday was Quitter's Day, and it sounds like people are giving up already on their resolutions, which is really sad. Because I remember a conversation you and I had, I don't know, it's been 4 or 5 years ago now. And you asked a question one night. We were having dinner. I think it was in maybe November. It was a few weeks before the end of the year. And you asked the question. I thought it was just fascinating. You said, what would we have to do to make this next year our best year? And that question really helped me back then to think through the last few years, how to make those years great. And I'm convinced that this next year, you and I both are going to try to make it our best year. And I'm hoping all these people that are listening, they'll join us on this trek to try to make 2025 our best year ever. So I think there's some things that we can to make that happen. We're going to talk about that today.
Yeah, my theme for the year is the best is yet to come.
I love that. I think that's so good. Well, we know that if we're going to have a really great year, I think we both would say one of the things that has a lot to do with that is our habits. And I want to talk about some habits today that I think are going to help people try to have the best year that they can. And I've said for years that your habits are perfectly designed to give you your current results. And as I look back on my last year, the things that I did really are the things that led to the results that I got. And so I think today we can help people thinking through some of these habits. I've been saying, I guess last year, that change is I mean, it's just what leaders do. You've written about this for a long time, this idea of reinventing continuously. And we're trying to reinvent a little bit of the podcast here, and we'll reinvent some areas of our lives. But my statement, I think, for 2024 was different is not always better. I mean, people listening, there's some things they're doing that are great, and they should keep doing those. But better is always going to be different. So if we want something different, we're really going to have to do something different, so to speak. If we want something better, we'll have to do something different. So this will be a fun conversation.
Yeah, and let me say a word about habits. Think about the alternative. The predominant alternative course is willpower. And I'm not against willpower, but I've actually seen studies that indicate humans only have so much willpower at their discretion. And so if you can move something out of, I'll do this because I have to, and deploy all of my energy and focus and willpower, if you can transform that into a habit, most of you aren't having to use willpower to take a shower or brush your teeth or do some other personal hygiene things, right? You're doing that because it's become habitual. And so I think there's real merit in selecting some things that will make a disproportionate impact in your life, and then work diligently, may require some willpower along the way, to convert them from discretionary to habits.
Yeah, that's great. So here's what I'd like to do today, Mark. I've got a little list of habits that I've made, and I think you've made a little list. And I believe we came up with 7 habits that we're going to give the listeners today, that I believe these, and some very practical things that they can do to implement these habits if they're not already, and maybe some ideas to enhance them if they already are practicing some of these things. I think this could be a foundational episode really for the year. I mean, I know we're a couple of weeks into the year now, 3 weeks into the year, but this is an opportunity for us to really identify the habits that are going to be core habits to our lives this year, and maybe again get some new ideas on how we can implement those. So if you're game, let's see if we can dive into these.
Yeah,
And
but let me say this: some of these things are not going to be revolutionary in concept, but they could be revolutionary in application and impact. So I hope you're ready for some things that are really practical, really pragmatic, but have the potential to be transformational.
yeah, that's great. I'm excited here. Okay, so I want to start with one that's it may surprise people, and maybe it won't if they know me, but I want to start with one that maybe our listeners haven't given a lot of thought to. I ran across a statistic this last year. It said that 1 out of every 3 people is struggling with mental health, anxiety, stress, depression, some kind of struggle. Really, I would put it in the mental health bucket. And I'm not a mental health expert by any stretch, but I think some of that ends up being linked to what I would call our soul. And I think leaders, so many times they're under so much stress. The old Shakespeare quote, "Heavy is the head that wears the crown." I think that's really true. The mantle of leadership is really heavy. And if you're a CEO, or if you're an owner of a company, or if you just lead a department or even lead a team, you know that it's really heavy to not just be responsible for yourself, but for all the people around you. That's so important. And so how do you keep your soul at a vibrant place? I got a friend who describes this idea of a buoy on water. I know you got a place. Sometimes we're on a boat and we're over, and you remember over there on Oconee, there's the buoys that are no wake zone, so to speak. Well, that'd be great if everybody that's listening would be able to have some days where there's a no wake zone, and maybe we'll talk about that in a second. But the truth is, most days there are waves coming all over us, and it becomes really hard to stay buoyant. And so I'm going to make the first habit of the year for me, and I would encourage our readers to give some thought to this. I'm going to say, let's pray this year. Let's pray. That sounds kind of crazy, and you might even add to it another little nuance I'll give you in just a second. But to me, how do we take care of our spiritual life? And I don't think enough people give enough thought to that. And so I want to encourage leaders to do that. Actually, I found a leader, this will be a familiar leader, but I love this. I want to read this quote. This is an Abraham Lincoln quote. Here's what he said. He said, "I've been driven many times upon my knees by the overwhelming conviction that I had nowhere else to go. My own wisdom and that of all about me seemed insufficient for the day." And I don't know about you, Mark, but there are so many days where I just feel like I'm not going to be able to do this on my own. And if heaven is offering help, I'm personally going to ask for it. So even if a leader's listening that you don't pray and you've not really prayed a lot, it's just a conversation, with God. And I think personally, back to Lincoln's point, if you feel overwhelmed, you do have permission to get down on your knees and say, "God, would you just help me?" And for some of you, that might be a new concept. I would encourage you to try it, see what happens. But Mark, we talk about all the time, we need to pray more. It seems like better things happen when we pray and we don't try to do it all on our own. But for me, if I try to do everything myself, try to be self-sufficient and handle it all, and I don't ask for help from God and maybe even the people around me, which is a little different. But I just think prayer is one of the things that can help our souls be buoyant and keep that vibrance, the energy that we need, the enthusiasm toward what we're doing, the passion, however you want to describe that. To me, it feels like a really big deal. You want to make a comment or anything on that?
Well, you've always challenged me. We need to pray more. So that's probably a good habit for leaders to cultivate for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll say one little thing. We talked about trying to make this at the beginning here. How do we make this practical? And so I want to give a couple of thoughts here. One is, I would encourage everybody listening, if you want to try this, get down on your knees every day and yield your life to the one who created you. I think that's a really good place to start. But I would link with that. I said there's a little nuance. I'd link with prayer. I think reading the Bible for me, it's just been such an important part. I feel like it's our source of truth. Um, Everybody will have their opinion on that, but if you're looking for a place to start with your Bible reading, you might even just pick the book of Proverbs. If you get yourself a Bible, you can. And by the way, there are Bible apps, all kind of places you can get access to the Bible if you don't have a hard copy. But if you have a hard copy, get it out and maybe just pick the book of Proverbs. And there are 31 Proverbs, and you might just read one of those a day for the next month. Just give it a try and see what happens. And I'm guessing you'll be like me. You'll glean all kind of wisdom from that book. It's a book of these pithy sayings that will help you, principle centered, and I think it could help every leader. So to me, if I'm gonna pick number one habit, I want to try to take care of my soul, make sure my spiritual life is where it needs to be to start with. I'm going to say let's pray, and I'm linking read the Bible there. I'm going to talk a little more about reading in a few minutes, but that's where I would start, Mark.
Okay, well, let me give you one. And it's something that I've talked about a lot in recent years. Let me give a little context, some of the backstory for folks that may not have heard us talk about this next idea. A few years ago, I had the privilege to lead a team who really had an audacious goal. We wanted to try to help leaders around the world improve their effectiveness. And as we began this project, I even had leaders ask me, is this going to teach me how to lead? We said, no, we're looking for the key or keys for men and women who know how to lead, but for any number of reasons, they're not leading to their full potential. We wrote about that in a book called Smart Leadership. But I want to share with you a habit that I have tried to cultivate for decades. And it was interesting to us that it was one of the key findings of that multi-year, multi-million dollar research project. And that is the best leaders cultivate the discipline or the habit of margin. Now, I don't know what comes to mind when you hear that. I have gotten some very hostile and negative responses when I start talking about margin. I had one leader say, I don't have time for a vacation. Well, I'm a fan of vacations, but that's not what we're talking about. And maybe you need one if that's your initial response when you hear the concept or the term margin. But let me tell you what it is. It is a leadership discipline. And it is not, this may be helpful for you, it's not time that you set aside to do email or to even catch up on your reading. It's not a time for administrative tasks and duties. But now those things have to be done. But margin, simply stated, is designated time to reflect on the past, to assess your current reality, and to create the future. And I've had leaders tell me, it breaks my heart when they say, I don't have time for those things. My question, if that's your response, is who's doing that? Who's doing that? If you don't have designated time to reflect, to assess, and create, there's a really good chance those critical activities aren't taking place for your team or your department or your division, or maybe for your organization. Now, as we did this work, we discovered that this is not a new practice. In fact, it's a practice that goes back thousands of years. We came across a study by Howard Gardner from Harvard, and he said that there's this dance. He calls it a rhythm of life, where historical great leaders like Lincoln and Churchill, and he would put Margaret Mead and Einstein. I mean, he said these men and women did this dance. He called it a move from immersion to separation. They would immerse in the activities and then they would separate. And during that time, they reflect, they assess, and they create. This is where you're going to solve your greatest problems. There's a term in psychology, it's called liminal space. And without like going down that road, I want to challenge those of you that think of liminal space as a negative. It is traditionally used as the space between. Think of it like the threshold on a door. If you're standing on a threshold, you're neither inside nor are you outside. You're in between. And a lot of people are stressed when they find themselves in this liminal space. I would challenge you that liminal space, that space between, is where opportunities lie. It's where innovation resides. It's where new ideas are born. And so if you'll set aside liminal space, you can look back, you can look at today, and you can look toward the future. Now, somebody, back to the spirit of making this pragmatic and practical, somebody's going to say, well, how much time do I need? Well, I don't know how much time you need. I would say the bigger your hopes, the bigger your dreams, the bigger your aspirations, the bigger the challenges and the bigger the problems you face, the more time you're going to need to reflect, to assess, and to create. Now, to give you a clue, and I'm not assuming you're a CEO and I'm not assuming you're a typical CEO, but Michael Porter from Harvard did a study where he looked at the calendars of CEOs for 12 years. And he discovered that they spend 28% of their working hours alone. Now, the first time I shared that number, somebody said, well, what are they doing with all that time? I said, well, I've never been a CEO, but here's what I think they're doing: reflect, assess, and create. So is 28% of your working hours your answer? Probably not. Some of you are going to need more time than that. Some of you may just need an hour a week. But I think that's my encouragement and my challenge to you as you begin to try to cultivate this discipline. Put some time on your calendar on a regular basis, schedule it, call it what you will, call it margin. I have for 30 years called it focus time, and find out what you can accomplish if you'll set aside that time, reflect, assess, and create. I think you'll discover that it is where you add the greatest value for your organization.
That's so good, Mark. There's going to be a temptation for anybody listening to go in back to want to default to back into the arena to your point there. Because I feel like I'm doing something when I'm in the arena, and sometimes when I'm out here in the liminal space or in the margin time, I might feel like I don't feel like we're getting anything done here. What I hear you saying is the most important thing we can do, possibly if we're that leader, is to make sure that we're spending that time in margin, thinking, assessing.
Well, I would say it's not even. I mean, I would state it more forcefully. This is your highest and greatest contribution.
Yeah.
Your team, your organization gets no credit for doing the wrong things well.
Yeah.
It's in this time that you'll be able to discern what are the things that you should be working on. What are the things that you should encourage and challenge and channel your team to work on and your organization. Yes, when at some points in your career, you're paid for your hands. When you move into leadership, you're paid for your head. You're paid for your judgment. You're paid for your intuition. Where does that intuition come from? It's from focused time. And I would argue in margin is the very best way to extract this value so that you can share it with the organization. Now, I'll quickly say I have had leaders say, well, I work on that kind of stuff in the car driving to work, and I solve those problems in the shower. Your biggest problems are not going to be solved on the way to work or standing in the shower. You're going to need dedicated time. You're going to need focus. And margin can provide that.
Yeah, I would say for the person who's listening and thinking, I'm going to do this maybe this week and try this, how much time, and they pick out a time, you might want to double the amount of time you think you need. Because I'm with you, Mark. I think we really underestimate this, and if we're not careful, we just we say this all the time. We confuse activity with accomplishment. And if you really want to get great stuff done, margin is a place to go. And I'm going to build on that, and I'm going to give them our third one here. It's the idea of focus. I think focus is a discipline. I would define it a little bit different than margin. I want to give them a little picture here. So One of the guys on our team, Scott, his daughter Ella, when she was in high school, Ella was in archery. She bow and arrow, she's shooting archery, and Scott told me the first time he went to one of these meets, they had a big target up, and he said around the outside of the target, there's rings, on these targets. You've seen an archery target before, and he said if you hit the outside ring, you do get some points, kind of like darts, but the more narrow you get, the more points you get. If you hit the one in the middle, the bullseye, you just get a whole lot of points. I mean, he didn't know how to keep score any more than I do, but he's like, that was the kids who hit the middle, those were the ones. And I think that's a really great picture for any leader who's thinking about their level of focus. I would encourage every single one to identify those areas in their life that are more sporadic versus strategic. I like margin is coming to the meeting I have with myself for focus. I mean, I think that's really what you do in this focus kind of time, but you really do have to narrow the target. And I'll give you a couple of thoughts here to make this one practical. If somebody's thinking about their goals for the year, you might list 10 things that you would say, these are things I would want to be true at the end of the year that maybe are not true today. If you could make a list of that, just get you a legal pad and, maybe write some of those out. I love the idea of narrowing that list down to maybe the 5 of those that you really, really want to happen. Maybe 10, these are ideas, things that could happen. The 5, though, that are really I want to happen. And then I'll ask it this way, if only one of those things could happen, no matter what, which one would you want to happen most? And I would encourage every single person to do that exercise, write that down. Maybe you would even ask it a little bit differently. You might ask, what would I regret at the end of the year if this one thing didn't happen? And I think that almost playing it forward in your mind, like what's it going to feel like if I go another year and I don't do what I know I'm supposed to do? You said at the beginning, we these are not a lot of new thoughts. I mean, most of us know what to do. It's just year after year after year, we put it off, we kick the can, and what happens is we get down the road and then we do experience regret as we look back. So I love that idea of focus, this idea. And I'll go back to my I mentioned a minute ago Bible reading. There's an old word in the Bible. It's actually the word for sin in the Bible. It's a Greek word, is hamartia, and it means to miss the mark. It's actually an archery word. If we think about sin, what should I do? And if I don't do that, that's not good. And what shouldn't I do? And if I do that, that's not good. That's the word they use. It's like you miss the target. And I think it's leadership sin to not know what the target is. I think it's leadership sin to not know what I should be focused on. I've not taken the time. I've not done the discipline of saying, what are the things that I want to be different a year from now? And how am I going to rank order that? And what's going to be most important? And that narrow focus gives me a chance to really hit the bullseye. If I don't give any thought to that, I have no chance. I know I'm going to get down the road and I'm going to look back and think, man, I didn't do it again. You can actually, goals is one way to do that. You could actually do it with words as well. What are 10 words that could potentially describe the way you want to live your life this year? Narrow that down to 5. And then we've got, some buddies who wrote a book called One Word. And I know a lot of people who narrowed down to one word each year, that they're going to let that word be their word. It's going to drive let's just say your word is passion. You're going to think about passion every meeting, every email. You're going to write it on your mirror. Everywhere you go, you're going to make sure you're bringing your best, your heart. Energy might be your word, or fitness. I mean, anybody pick any word they want to, but I love the idea of having something that I can focus on to narrow my target. And if I do that, I think I got a much better chance of hitting it if I know what I'm shooting at than I do if I'm just, again, being sporadic and hoping that, we end up at a good place. And you always say hope is not a strategy. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I think we've got to focus if we're really going to get to where we want to go. So to me, that's a big one here. So I would throw that in as a habit.
Well, and so let me say this: whether you choose one word or not, whether they're 2 things or 4 things, I think everybody watching or listening to this should be able to answer the question, what's your focus for 2025?
Love that.
I think that'll help you move so much further and so much faster towards your goals and dreams and aspiration. All right, so let me share another one. Again, well, this won't surprise anybody who's listened to much of our content over the last 18 months or your content for a decade, Randy. I think you need to cultivate the habit of growth, personal growth. And I know for some of you that is really, really easy and you want to fast forward and like, okay, let's move ahead. I got that. But for many of you, you've not yet decided that you're going to commit to lifelong learning. So I'm going to tell a story that I've told before, and I've actually written about this. It was 1979. I had joined the Chick-fil-A Incorporated staff in 78. And I had moved, I started in the warehouse in the mailroom, and I had moved to start what is today corporate communications. And so I'd been in the job really just a matter of days, and my boss walked in, and I was wondering if I was in trouble. Like, my boss is in my office, so what's going on? And he said, "Hey, I just wanted to stop by and explain to you how the world works." Now, keep in mind, I was 19 at the time. And I said, "Wow, like, you know how the world works?" And he said, "I do." And I said, "Well, I'd love to hear it." And he said, "If you want more influence and you want more opportunity and you want to have greater impact, there's only one path." And as I recall the conversation, that was a long time ago, but I said, "Okay, say all that again." He said, "If you want more influence and you want more opportunity and you want more impact, there's only one path." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "And you know the path?" And he said, "I absolutely do. It's lifelong learning." He said, "If you look at men and women who add value throughout their life, they've all committed to lifelong learning." Now, in the years since that conversation, here's the way I've summarized it for leaders specifically. Your capacity to grow and my capacity to grow will determine our capacity to lead. Our capacity to grow will determine our capacity to lead. And so that day in 1979, I said, if that's how the world works, sign me up for that. Now, my parents wish that we had had that conversation years prior because I was an awful student. But even to this day, I am committed to lifelong learning. It's not one of my top 34 strengths from Strength Finders. I don't think it's in my top 20. But I made a strategic choice that I believed would give me more influence, more opportunity, and more impact. And I just updated my 30-year plan. I mean, I'm planning to learn and grow until the day I die. So for some of you who've not made that choice will precede the habit. You're never going to do the habit until you decide that that's what you want to do. And so I would say the ball's in your court. And once you make that type of decision, really, that choice, then the rest is execution. And you can build a plan accordingly based on your learning style and your preferences, the availability of resources, whether you use mentors or you love audiobooks or whatever. Some of you are going to be experiential in your preferred learning style, but you can figure all that out once you've made the decision. And I think you'll realize that it can become a habit pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. I love that, and we're going to give them an idea at the end today on maybe a first step toward that. So our last habit, we'll talk about that. Okay, so I got one more, and I think you got one more, and then we'll give them the last one. Uh, so I'm gonna go ahead and I feel obligated here. It's January. I'm gonna go ahead and say that exercise, or I'll use the word move. I think exercise or the discipline of moving. We can simplify it there. I think this is huge. I mean, I do think there's a reason that people set New Year's resolutions every year. They do want to be more fit. They want to be more healthy. Sometimes they want to lose weight. They understand that there's a lot tied up in this idea of exercise, and I couldn't agree more. You read anything on it at all, and maybe I would even say it this way: maybe the number one habit you could have in a high tech sedentary world is a commitment to exercise. I mean, there's just so much benefit of that. And I made a little list of several things that I think are benefits of it. First of all, when I exercise, I always feel better about myself than I do if I don't exercise. In fact, I can't remember a time where I ever thought I want to go to the gym today, and I'm like, or I'm going to go for a run today, and then I don't do it. And I can't ever remember a time that I don't think, man, I should have done that. I wish I'd have done that, or I feel guilty about it. And then flip it around. Have you ever gone to the gym, Mark, or you ever gone on a run or gone on a walk or whatever, and you got through with it and you thought, man, I hate that I've exercised today. I mean, it's never happened. It's never. I
Right.
mean, we never regret doing the right thing. I mean, it's not just in exercise. That's true in every area. But I mean, think about it. When you exercise, your weight is probably going to be a little more in check with where it's supposed to be. But we talked about mental health earlier. You know, you can pray, yeah, but if you can go for a walk as well, and you can help your mental health, your emotional health, your mood, your heart health obviously gets better when you exercise.
Your
Your
energy as well.
energy is going to be higher. Your mobility, you and I, we're getting older, and mobility is really important. But it's not just important when you're older. You want to be able to do the things that your body's capable of when you're younger. And we know we were talking about the leader, the CEO, the team leader, the coach, whoever is listening. It's so easy to get buried in that busyness of the business, so to speak, and neglect. I don't have time to exercise, just like I don't have time for margin. We think I don't this bad English. I don't think you have time not to exercise. I'm not sure about the double negative. Just exercise. This is important. I mean, to me, this is a really big deal. And I would say we're also going to studies show. I read something from the Mayo Clinic. We're going to sleep better if we exercise as well. So to me, I don't need to say a lot about it. I will say one more little thing I'll give you a nuance on this one as well. Nutrition, I'm not going to talk about here, but nutrition is really important. And I see people this happen. I've done this before. I'll think I've exercised really hard. Let me reward myself with something that I probably shouldn't be eating. And I just would remind everyone. My sister's actually a trainer, and she tells me you can't out exercise a bad diet. You've got to pay attention to that as well. So we could probably do an episode on nutrition. Maybe we will at some point. But this to me, let's don't neglect what we put in our bodies, but we need to move our bodies if we're going to be fit to lead, so to speak. Somebody's used that term before, and I kind of like that. So
All right.
let's move.
I know we're not talking about nutrition, but give us a quick word. You changed your diet, and what happened to your cholesterol?
Yeah, it dropped precipitously, and all I did was basically drop dairy and any kind of refined sugars. I mean, I'm not a big sweet eater. I'll have sweets occasionally, but I just started saying no to some of that. But cheese is my weakness. I love the cheese, and so yeah, my doctor told me, he said you need to have some medication to help you get this intact. And he said, I don't think you can do it with your diet. And so I'm like, well, you don't know what I've been eating. And so I stopped some of the dairy and red meat. I really cut most of that out of my diet altogether. And my numbers went right back to where they're supposed to be. So it's,
Yeah, he's gonna be shocked the next time you show up in his office.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
great. That's
Anyway,
great.
so, yeah,
All right, so I'm going to add one more habit for folks to consider, and you referenced it there. If you exercise, you'll sleep better, but you got to sleep even if you don't exercise.
that's right.
Sleep is a huge challenge, opportunity. I actually think it's a global pandemic, and I don't use that term lightly, given what we went through. There's studies out there. 7 of the 15 leading causes of death are directly linked to lack of sleep. They've started releasing global sleep data. It's now less than 6 hours a night average in Tokyo. It's 6 hours and 3 minutes in South Korea. We're getting this global look at a world that just does not sleep enough. It's costing, last number I saw, conservative estimates, $680 billion globally because people are sleep deprived. It impairs our thinking. It impairs our judgment. You might as well be intoxicated if you're out there trying to make decisions when you're sleep deprived. it's just 40% of Americans are clinically sleep deprived. I mean, just think about that. And then there are all the traffic accidents. I won't get into all the statistics, but so many of those and the lives that are lost, it's tied to someone who was drowsy or falling asleep while they were driving. I mean, it is just crazy. And so I would encourage you, I would challenge you, you need to get sleep. Now, can you survive? Well, sure. I don't think people listening to this show or watching this, I don't think you're in a survival mindset. I hope you're in the mindset that you want to thrive and you want to add maximum value and you want to contribute as much as humanly possible. You'll never do that if you're sleep deprived. I had a fun encounter with Jim Collins, the Good to Great, built to last Jim Collins. He was a friend of our organization, had the chance to come and speak several times for us, and I got to go visit him at his office in Boulder. And he had become devoted to sleep. He said that when he gets more sleep, he asks better questions. And wouldn't we all like to ask better questions? That's another topic for another day. But sleep is it's available, right? I mean, there's some things you can do to make it better and not watch your phone late at night and watch your caffeine intake. I mean, there's some sleep hygiene stuff. I'm not going to get into that today. I think the fundamental challenge is that people, leaders, aren't committing to sleep. And they're going, well, I don't have time. Again, it may be another one of those things. Maybe you don't have time not to do it. I'm back to you on trying to how to structure that sentence. There's so many examples in the world of sports. Golden State has been experimenting with this. The basketball team and what's his name? Andre Iguodala. Help me pronounce his name. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you pronounce his name?
I think it's they call him Iggy. I don't know.
Iguodala.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So he did this. He said he was dedicated to improving his sleep. His 3-point percentage doubled. His free throw percentage went up 8.9%, and his turnovers went down 37%.
Isn't that crazy?
So there are individuals, there are entire teams that are doing this. So sports just being a microcosm of life, right? If it'll help an athlete, why wouldn't it help a corporate athlete? Why wouldn't it help a leader? I would just challenge you, go to bed just a little bit earlier, because I know most of you can't say I'm going to go in an hour late or 2 hours late, but you can go to sleep an hour earlier. And I would encourage you to get some type of device to help track your sleep. I'm using a Whoop, and it tracks not only the hours, but how well I recovered, heart rate variability, temperature, respiration, on and on, all kind of data there. But do whatever you need to do to get enough sleep to lead well.
Yeah, and I'd just say practically, get yourself a comfortable pillow, bedding. There's all kind of stuff you can look up. The temperature of your room is going to. I mean, there's a science here if you really want to maximize and take your performance to the next level. And if you may think, well, I'm not playing sports or whatever. I mean, you're making those decisions for those organizations or your team, your family, whatever. Those things matter. Your quality of life will be better if you sleep. Probably more. Maybe we need to take some naps too, Mark. I don't know. That's good.
Right,
okay,
you got one more?
Yeah, I got one more, and I want to actually take this one. I know we've kind of unpacked a few here and given some people some ideas, but again, I think this is all foundational for the year. And I'm gonna use this last one. I'm gonna say the habit of reading. I'm gonna try to read more this year, but I think for leaders, this idea of reading. So many benefits when we read it. We get to interact with other people. Sometimes we get to interact with, I get to interact with Abraham Lincoln and he, a couple hundred, whatever, 100 years later, 150 years later, when you read his stuff, or you can read people from centuries ago, which is pretty cool. The Bible, I mean, a centuries old book, and that timeless wisdom is so good. I think sometimes we're so busy. We think I don't have time to read, but you mentioned there's audiobooks and all kind of ways to do that. And I'm not going to say a lot about reading today, but I want to give people a book to think about, and we're gonna review a book, and at the end of every episode or some point in every episode. And today I thought this book really tied well into what we're talking about today. And many people are probably familiar with this book, but maybe they need to review some of it if they've read it before. But it's the book, James Clear did a book called Atomic Habits, and it's been a big time selling book over the last 5 or 6 years. And I actually, we were on a trip overseas not long ago, and I saw he also has a master class, and I was watching the master class on the flight, and there was some good reminders from that. And so I want to give you a couple of quotes and try to whet people's appetite here for this thing, Mark, and let you respond to a couple of things. But one of the things he talks about in Atomic Habits is being great at being consistent. And I think in the spirit of these habits, the power is going to be in the day after day after day consistency. He even says consistency in its own form is a form of greatness. And I like that reminder that just showing up day after day and doing the work, there's a lot of power in that. You agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so here's what he says. Think about this. I want you to think about some areas of your life where this has been true. So you go all the way back to that 19-year-old kid you were talking about yourself being. He says, show up small and you will surprise yourself over time. I mean, it's just these small daily habits, day after day after day, over a 40-year career. You know, you're like me. You look back now, and I don't regret. I mean, I've grown so much since I was that age. But I get to here, and I'm thinking there's so much more I want to do, and so many more ways I want to grow. But I don't regret any days that I've done the right thing. It's those days that I put things off, and I thought, well, I'll do that tomorrow. Those are the days I wish I had back, or the moments I wish I had back. I mean, again, you got a thought there?
Yeah. I mean, I think you've said it well. You don't regret doing the right thing. And so the more you can do the right thing, the fewer regrets you'll have when you get down the road.
That's good. Okay, so a couple more thoughts from Collins, or I said Collins, you said Collins a minute ago, from James Clear's book. He says, hey, I love this question. What am I willing to stick to even on my worst day? So how many times, Mark, have you had a day, you're planning to go to the gym, something this happened to me the other day. I'm on my way to work out. I walk out of my garage and my truck I've got a flat tire. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, it's just one of those moments, So I changed the tire and I end up still going to the gym because I'm thinking I am not going to let this circumstance win in this moment. I've got to stick to my commitments no matter what happens. And I know stuff happens way worse than a flat tire sometimes, but I think if we're not careful, we can find any little reason to justify not doing, I'll do that tomorrow. And I think tomorrow is our enemy if we're not careful when it comes to what we're talking about.
And I'll one other tactic that may serve some of our listeners is put things on the calendar. Now that may sound like trivial. The calendar has an irrational power, at least for professional people, men and women, leaders. Like you generally do what's on your calendar. If there's a meeting, you go to that meeting. And if it says you're going to get on an airplane, you get on that airplane. And if it says you're going to the gym, there's a greater likelihood that you're actually going to the gym. And so I would say any of these habits, as much as you can time activate them, I think your probability of success goes way up. I've already got I've got some exercise stuff that's programmed with a trainer, and then I've got some walks that I'm going to do with my wife, and they're on the calendar too. Because if I don't put them on the calendar, the chances of us doing those extended walks, the probability goes way down.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, a couple more thoughts from Atomic Habits. I love this. He says, when dreaming or making plans, we're dreaming about the future. We've got this vision. He says, when you're dreaming or making plans, think big. When you're executing, think small. And again, this is a little bit about what kind of life do we want this year? And we have this big dream about the end of 2025, but it's really going to be these small steps, these habits that we've talked about today, and maybe many more. We do those things. It's amazing how you end up getting to your destination if you're going down the right road. But if you're on the wrong road or you're not on the road, you get down to the end, the time's still going to go by. And when it does, you look back and you think, man, I'm still where I started. I mean, it's the old, you're getting what you're getting because you're doing what you're doing. And if we don't do something different again, we're not going to end up with anything different. Okay, I want to give you one more thought here, Mark, from this. And I love this. Your calendar is what made me think of this. He says, can your current habits carry you to your desired future? And he asked the question, what would a better system look like? In other words, your habits, your systems, your calendar, in your case, you're talking about the calendar. He says if there's a gap between your goal and your system, a gap between your desired outcome and your daily habits, your habits are always going to win. And I think that's so powerful. If we've got this gap between what we want and our habits, and our habits are not, there to give us our habits are going to win. And so we didn't mention this, but there are a lot of bad habits too. So we need to make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do to go where we want to go. So
I'm wondering if do we need to do an episode on bad habits? I'm not sure. I may be out of town that day. I'll let you do the bad habits show.
I don't want to. I want no part of bad habits, and unfortunately, they do creep up, and so we all have to battle against that. So, yeah, for anybody's listening, we just want to encourage you to maybe in your margin time, assess your habits and do a little thinking and planning about what you're really going to need to do to get you where you want to go. Any final word, Mark? I'll give them a little where they can find us here in a second. But any final thoughts here on habits?
Yeah, just your habits are going to be so critical over time. And in the world we live in with so much chaos and craziness, and it's really good to have some things that you know. And whether it's I know I'm going to grow, I know I'm going to read, I know I'm going to carve out margin or whatever, because that's the choice you've made. That's the way you've decided to live your life. I think you'll find tremendous comfort, reassurance, and progress as you embrace an ever widening scope of habits.
Yeah, that's great. Mark, you remember last year we did an event and we spoke, both of us spoke at an event, and Rourke Denver, the Navy SEAL, was there. You remember Rourke, and this was great. And he told us, we had a chance to talk to
former commander of the Navy SEALs.
He's a big deal. Yeah. And Rourke said, I love this. He said, when you get in a battle, and all of us are in a battle, right? We really are going to have these moments this year where it's going to be a challenge. And he said, when you get in a battle, you don't rise to the occasion. You sink to the level of your training. You sink to the level of your habits. And so anybody's listening, you get to decide what kind of life. I really believe this. You get to decide what kind of life you want to have, but your habits are what's going to take you there. And so we would encourage you to double down on that this year. And we look forward to hearing your progress. You can reach out to us. We're available at leadeveryday.com. That's our website. Check that out. If you need us, info@leadeveryday.com. You can communicate with us there. We love your feedback on the new format here. If you would leave us a rating on the podcast sites, Apple and Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast, that would be great. Love a 5-star there. And make sure you subscribe if you've not done so. We're gonna put one of these out every week, Mark. So next week is going to be interesting. You want to give them a little preview? We got an
I think next week we're going to talk about Trump 2.0. The inauguration is taking place, I guess, today, and so we're going to talk about advice to new leaders.
Yeah, that's going to be great. I can't wait to hear some of your thoughts on that next week and have that conversation with you. All right. We love you guys. We hope you'll keep listening. Share with your friends and family. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.